Okay, good morning, everybody. Good to see all of you this morning. Welcome. Everybody hear me good? Hear me well? Very good. Okay. All right. Welcome to our class. This is Practicing the Way. And so just to let you know what we do here, we are working through a book and we're studying spiritual practices. What we do every week is we have a period of teaching, a didactic portion of our teaching, and I go over some principles in the Bible, and then we talk about that, discuss it. There's a lot of time for discussion in this class. We go over a spiritual practice each week, and then we go through the week reflecting on what we learned and practicing that, and then we come back in community and process it. So we do that every single week, and I do want to remind everybody, sitting at a table with other people will enhance your discussion. So if it's just you, or you want to hop over, you can wait till discussion time if you want to, but discussion's a lot better if you're not by yourself, talking to yourself. Although nobody's going to judge you if you want to do that either. So we're working through, we're reading through the book. We're not kind of working through it. This is a companion book. I do highly recommend you get it and read it. And it's available on Amazon pretty cheap. You can buy it there. Let's review what we talked about last week a little bit. We introduced the idea of Sabbath. And this is actually what we want to talk about today. This morning we're going to be talking about Sabbath throughout the main lesson here. But for anybody who practiced this, I know Mike and Lou practice every single day. Their Sabbath, they're retired, so they took their Sabbath rest every afternoon about 1 o'clock, I think. For those of you who tried to practice it, as we talked about, what was challenging to you about practicing Sabbath? Not doing anything. Okay. You wanted to do some stuff? I had. Yeah. Had to do some stuff. Yes, Leola?
Once I learned about Sabbath and what God required of the Israelites in the Old Testament, and that mistake that worked so very well. Once I found out that was a requirement, it was easy for me.
Yeah.
I go back and lay down, I rest a while, and I get back up, and
there you go.
Explore, and then I lay back down. Oh, it was just a blessing.
All right. Well, praise God, Leola.
One day I went Saturday, I went out and bought something. But I don't buy, I don't sell.
Good. Okay.
I don't even leave the house.
All right.
I enjoy the people for me. But I bought something, and the next we were just messed up. And this is really about spirit.
Yes. Well, I don't know if y'all heard what she's saying, though, but she practiced Sabbath, and has been practicing this, and it's been a blessing to her, and it's all gone well, and she takes a nap, gets back up, does a little bit at the house. No work, no buying, no selling, and that's been a blessing. In fact, one week she said that she felt a little out of whack, and it was because she realized she had done some little work on her Sabbath time. So I've heard this, once you get in that rhythm and you interrupt that, and you can feel the results of that. Thank you for sharing that. Let me ask you this, and Leola, you may want to share this too, or anybody else who practice it. Where did you experience God's nearness? Where did you most experience God's nearness in the practice of Sabbath?
Because I was, and I always want to do the will of God. You see, earth is what we do on earth and what happens on earth. It's kind of real challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read about heaven and not challenging. It's going to be.
Yeah.
So I want to do what I need to do to get to that place where it's not so challenging. And so when I read the Bible and learn what God requires, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure it makes God happy. And so when I'm reading the Bible, sometimes I'm reading the words of Jesus, sometimes tears just come to my eyes. It's just that real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I do the will of God, I'm just seasoning the cycle. And so that's what kind of keep me kind of near to what we don't see. Sometimes we don't see it, we don't get it,
Yeah.
But as we grow and as we experience it, then we come to a place where we realize what's really going on.
Yeah, well, praise God. Thank you, Lil. I appreciate that. I like what she said there. Sometimes reading the words of Jesus brings tears to her eyes. She feels that near to him. Very good. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and we'll review what we talked about last week. Last week was the practices. So the practices are disciplines based on the lifestyle of Jesus that create time and space for us to be with God. And so what we've been talking about is kind of theory a little bit. Last week, the rubber's starting to meet the road. These are things we can do, practice, do the things we can do so that God can do the things we cannot do. Practices are a means to an end to live and love like Jesus. That's why we're doing this. We're not practicing Sabbath or praying or reading scripture or whatever else we're doing to say we've done these things. But we're doing it to get somewhere, to be like Jesus. That's the point. They are not the whole of the spiritual life. They are just one part of it. So this is not everything. This is not all encompassing of our faith. We approach deeper changes in our lives indirectly by practicing these disciplines. We talked about how you can change some things just head on. Wrestle it, get it, face it, get it done. But there are deeper problems we have, deeper habits and family of origin stuff, family system stuff that are deeply ingrained within us that you just can't up and change one day. So over time, by engaging in these practices, we can start chipping away at those things and let God form us into something different. That's the idea there. They're essential for us to be transformed in the image of Jesus. One thing we talked about was Sabbath, which is a day where we stop, rest, delight, and worship. All right, so today, I just thought this is, to me, maybe I'm projecting here, but to me, this is quite a foreign concept, honestly, of like a true actual Sabbath. So what I wanted to do is to camp out a little bit and just rehash, well, not rehash, I want to say some new stuff today, but I want to tease out more about what Sabbath is, what it means biblically, and us to talk about that a little more. Since I got a feeling I'm not the only one who has not been practicing Sabbath very much, based on my engagement with you guys talking. But I want to share a short video to start with. This is, y'all have heard me quote Dallas Willard, one of the great teachers of spiritual formation. He has a book actually called The Divine Conspiracy. If you don't have that book, I would recommend you go home and find something to sell so you can buy this book. Read the Bible, read Flannery O'Connor, read Dallas Willard, okay? This book is blowing my mind. In fact, it's informing a lot of what I'm preaching in the Sermon on the Mount. He's got a whole section of Sermon on the Mount. Anyway, this is his spouse, his widow actually, died 10 years ago. And this is her talking about what the practices have done in her life. I just want to share this with you. I thought this was very good.
I'm Jane Willard, and I live in Southern California. I'm a therapist who worked in a Christian counseling center and was able to utilize prayer and inner healing in my sessions. And I was married to Dallas Willard for 57 years. One discipline that I have practiced is doing the Ignatian exercises. It's a time of 30 weeks. And so I gathered a group, a little group, there are just 3 of us, and we told about our week and our experience with the scriptures, which this is based on. One time during that course of 30 weeks, I was at the piano and I was singing a love song to the Lord. It was from the movie Julie and Julia, and it was time after time you'll hear me say that I'm so lucky to be loving you. So lucky to be the one you run to see in the evening when the day is through. And in the midst of singing that, and I still get chills now, I suddenly realized that God was singing that to me. Any other time, it wouldn't have been something that I could have taken seriously, especially with the terms lucky. In there, I would think the Lord would use blessed, but for me, he was using lucky, but it was the time when I couldn't get to my exercises, my hour-long exercises that we did for 30 weeks. I could only get there at the latest thing at night. It was in the evening when the day is through that he would be the one I would run to see. And I treasure that memory of that experience with Jesus.
Okay. I like that a lot. What she said there, to pick up what she was saying. The Ignatian exercises, these are 30 weeks. It's a long, rigorous program with spiritual formations. This kind of stuff in a cohort kind of thing. And if you picked up what she's saying, she was singing this song. And she was singing it to the Lord. It's this old, really old song. It's like a pop song, but it's really old. And what she realized in this moment of her time with the Lord, that he was actually singing it to her. These words she's saying, he was saying that back to her. And so through these exercises, through the practices, she felt the tangible love of God in her body. I like that a lot. It's kind of what Leota was talking about a minute ago. Reading the words of Jesus brought tears to her eyes. So that's part of the end goal here. We're not just doing these things to do, we're doing them to get closer to Jesus and to be more like him. Okay? So with that in mind, I want to talk about Sabbath in particular. I want to review a little bit. Wednesday, I elaborate a little more on this. You can go back and we got that video on YouTube. If you want to watch that, you can. What we talked about there is that rest is essential to apprenticeship in Jesus. You've got to rest. If our goal is to be more like Jesus, we can't do that. We're chronically tired. We talked about all this Wednesday night. It's hard to love God when you're worn out, right? You're more prone to sin when you're tired, when chronically ill, lack of rest erodes our energy. We make bad choices. You can't have self-discipline when you're really tired. You're going to be more impulsive and making choices that are not good when you're tired. That's not good. It's hard to love people when you're worn out. Tired people are not loving people. We talked about this. And actually, most of my worst experiences, my worst moments are when I'm really tired. And I'm ill, and I'm snappy, I'm stressed, I'm irritable, and I'm not nice to my family. Okay, those are not good times. I need to check out and just be aware of myself and stop and rest. And I know I'm not the only one. We talked about that Wednesday, and we all kind of commiserated on that moment there. The original precedent for Sabbath is, of course, the seventh day of creation. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So if you feel like you got too much to do, as we often do, I can't stop. Well, God stopped. Who has more to do than God? Right? He's overseeing the universe. Your life is not as big as the universe. Your job is not as big as the universe. Any task you got to do, any stuff you got to do is not as important as what God has to do. He's creating this rhythm. God didn't have, we talked about all this, God doesn't have to make the world in 6 days or 7 days. He's doing that to establish a rhythm of our life. And so this is woven into the fabric of who we are as human beings. Resisting and fighting against Sabbath is going to get you to the same place resisting and fighting against gravity will. It's just going to hurt you and wear you out even more. The Hebrew word Shabbat literally means to stop. Okay, you stop doing stuff. It can also mean, or it's used for rest, delight, or worship. We're going to talk most about rest this morning. Sabbath is not simply about stopping, it is about resting. We have a hard time with this, don't we? The fear of missing out, right? That's something else. I got too much to do, like we talked about earlier. Solomon said, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Right? Nothing satisfies us. We see and we want more and more and more. The wise man Solomon said this. Another wise man said, I can't get no satisfaction. Okay? And that's very true. Because no matter how much we get, it's never enough, is it? If I work a little more, then I'll achieve this promotion, and then I'll be happy. If I get a little more money, then I can get this stuff, then I'll be happy. What happens? Well, the luster wears off, and you want something else then. And it's never, ever enough. It's never enough. Right? If I achieve this milestone, I'll be happy. Well, there's always another milestone. There's always something else. And so we have this restlessness about us. And it's exacerbated and exploited, honestly, by our culture. Western consumerism, the advertising, they are monetizing your restlessness. We talked about that Wednesday, that all these ads from decades ago are trying to offer you Sabbath. You want rest, buy my stuff and you'll get rest, but you never do. It's never there. More stuff, and then we can rest. No, that's not how it works at all. So I want to read, we talked about Exodus 20 Wednesday night, about God telling us to remember the Sabbath. I want to look at the other version of the Ten Commandments, one that was repeated 40 years later in Deuteronomy 5. Here God said, now the situation's different here. On Exodus 20, God is at Mount Sinai. They just passed through the Red Sea. It's the Exodus. And God's giving them the Ten Commandments. Now, this is a whole new generation. All those folks, or the vast majority of them, had died. Now, these are people who've never heard this from God anyway. And so this is the repetition of the law. There's some differences here. They're about to cross the Jordan River now. And God gives them the Ten Commandments over again. Listen to what he says here. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. All right, so what are the differences between this and Exodus 20? Well, one is in Exodus 20, it says, remember the Sabbath. It goes back to creation. God made the world in 7 days. God rested, you rest. Observe. But it's where this says observe, you're keeping it, you're guarding it. The reason's a little different here too. Whereas that's looking back to creation. God made the world, then he rested, so you should do this also. Here in Deuteronomy 5, God is saying, you were a slave in Egypt. Why are you keeping the Sabbath? Because you're not a slave anymore. Why do I command you to keep the Sabbath? Because I freed you out of slavery. Why do you want to go back into slavery? Think about that. That's big. In Exodus, Sabbath is about rhythm. In Deuteronomy, Sabbath is about resistance. And often a self-imposed slavery, in a way. Y'all seen this, haven't you? Dollar bill, of course. You've seen that. You ever notice that little, now I will say, we love National Treasure, that movie, the Disney movie. I'm not promoting any kind of weird conspiracy theories from National Treasure. Y'all seen, raise your hand if you've seen National Treasure. Okay, I feel a little better now. Okay. But do you notice the pyramid there on the dollar? It's got the eye over, of course. You notice the pyramid's not done, though? Do you know why it's not done? It's very intentional. Because the founding fathers and everything, I'm not trying to be critical of anybody or anything, but the idea was America's just getting started. We're not done yet, right? Like they built the great pyramids of Egypt, we're building something great too, and we're not done. Well, it's still on our dollar bill, y'all. It's like we're never done, are we? We just keep working, keep grinding, keep trying to achieve more and more greatness, but we never, ever get there. So that's kind of more, I think now that's more of an indictment on our culture than a blessing. It's about growth. We're going to grow. At what expense, though? So just to sum this up, we work more than ever before. We have more than ever before. We're still not happy. We are slaves in Egypt all over again. God gave us Sabbath because he's reminding us you're not slaves. Here we are neglecting Sabbath and entering slavery. So, rest is an act of resistance. Rest is a way that we say, enough, I'm done. Okay? I've got enough, I can be happy. Now, this is not to say accomplishments and achievements are wrong. We're not promoting laziness. We're not promoting, 2 Thessalonians, Paul's talking there about. There were some in the church who were just kind of kicking it until Jesus comes back. And then Paul tells them, no, don't do that. If a man doesn't work, then he shouldn't eat, right? We should work, of course. But achievements and accomplishments are not wrong, but there's a limit, right? We don't need as much as we think we do. I don't need a new car. The car you got is good. It's getting you ready to go, right? It's reliable. It's good, okay? You see the new shiny car, you want that? You don't need that. I do not need the perfect grade in school. You'll be happy in your life being A- student or a B+ student, right? I do not need the perfect body. I do not need the perfect house. It ain't got to be perfect, y'all. Okay? Spotless all the time. I do not need the perfect yard. Okay? What do folks think about me? You don't need to think about you. Matthew 11:28. This is what Jesus invites us to. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. God is Lord of the Sabbath, and he's offering rest for your souls. Will we take him up on that? Or do we want to keep grinding and grinding, trying to achieve? Yes?
I remember seeing a painting years ago. This couple was sitting on the porch, and just there was no rock on there.
Mm-hmm.
And that somehow stuck in my life. We used to individually sit on the porch and relax.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, what do I do today? So I, listening to your lesson, I know why, because I'm an emotional, and I find it hard sometimes to get off. It reminds me of a hamster. They're in cages.
Yep.
They just going round and round and round and round. You think, when are you gonna find what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's true.
So a child is going to act like that. And so we're like that hamster. We just going round and round and round.
Yeah.
No sense of direction. I don't really go around that place.
Yeah.
They want you to get out in the car, get those things. I want something else.
Right. Yep.
So, we just have to learn. I think it's not right in the book about that Esau eliminated his hurried attitude from our lives. Finally, some time to rest.
Mm-hmm.
That is really when we can know God and be with God. It's really rest.
Mm-hmm.
I know that little scene of Morocco painting.
Yeah. Right.
But it seems like old generation didn't know how to rest.
Seems like, yeah. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit too. Gwen, you got a comment? Okay. I thought about Andy Griffith too. I mentioned Andy Griffith last week. Barney and Andy on the front porch. It's interesting though, because that was made in the 50s and 60s, I believe. And that was not a real calm time in our country, if you recall that era, right? And Andy Griffith said that's a nostalgia for what more like life in the 20s and 30s was. Earlier and earlier and earlier. They might have done it a little better back then because they didn't have as many distractions as we do now. But if you think about it, they didn't do it back then in the Bible times either. They made Sabbath more of a burden than anything. So this is hard for us. We got to stop. Stopping and resting gives us time to reflect on our beliefs and experiences. All right, so this is something else I'm just going to introduce real briefly here. But if you stop and rest, a lot of times, the thoughts I have for sermons, points I'll make, they don't come when I'm sitting at my desk reading and studying. They come some other random time when I'm not doing that. So when you stop and separate yourself it gives your mind and body time to catch up almost. And when you stop, you can really experience and see what God has done. We believe these things, but the practices give us a place to really experience it. I want to show you another, this is a little 1-minute video. This is a couple, Gabriel and Tiffany are their names. They're sharing the story of how Sabbath affected them when they started practicing it.
There's a certain just moment that consistently I share with the Father, with the Spirit of God, that is feeling just a deep sense of contemplation, where there's that actual felt experience on this side where I see him looking at me, taking delight as I take delight in him. And that's that very hard to explain sort of category of just choosing to believe that Jesus lived, died, and was resurrected, and how that love even still now flows into that space and time, and what that means if I actually take those thoughts to believe and then to practice those things. And so I just don't know that I would have even teased out or nuanced any of those thoughts to that point unless given that time to stop, to just hold on and to work some of these things out.
Okay, did y'all catch what he was saying there? His voice is very deep. I know it's kind of muffled, a little bit hard to hear. What he was saying was the resurrection. He's talking about all these big theological terms and how it's connected to him. He's like, I didn't really connect all that. I didn't tease it out until I stopped and rested and dwelled in that. So he's saying he practiced Sabbath, and then it's like the major things of his faith became real to him in a different way. Okay, so that's all I got to say about that. Let's talk about this now for a minute here with some group discussion. So if you're at a table, if you want to grab, be with somebody else, you feel free to move and be with somebody. That's going to help. But here's the question I want to ask first. What are the obstacles that get in the way of your practicing Sabbath, either practically or emotionally? Y'all talk about that for a few minutes. you are dismissed too. I apologize for not turning the audio down. Bye.